This is Covering the Spread. Here are your hosts, Jim Saunders and Dr. Ed Feng.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome on into Covering the Spread. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com, where today we are getting you set for college football week number 10 and talking about the college football playoff rankings with Ben Stevens of SportsGrid, getting his thoughts on both those things and what they mean for the betting market. My name is Jim Saunders. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, joined here as always by Dr. Ed Feng. You can find his work over at thepowerrank.com. Ed, we talked a lot about Michigan State last week, and a game where Michigan seemed to outplay Michigan State. Michigan State got the big plays. They swung in their favor, and they got the win there. What are your thoughts coming off of that big game?
Yeah, it was a disappointing game for Michigan. I thought they played better. I think they're the better team slightly. But at the end of the day, the defense just couldn't get the stops they needed in the second half. I think it's that simple. And I think we saw one of the best performances we'll see out of Cade McNamara. I thought he had a really good game. Obviously threw the pick at the end, which wasn't helpful, but at some point in the first half, he was 10 for 12, and one of the incompletions was a drop. So in general, he played pretty well. Michigan's defense couldn't do their part. And it's interesting here in Ann Arbor because after the game, everyone wanted Harbaugh's head. Everyone wanted him fired again. It was like, they're 7-1, top 10 team. And you were all the people that didn't even want to watch any of the games this year.
Right.
At the beginning of the season. So I thought that was hilarious. But, it does kind of point to a deeper, I think often coach and fan base can get at odds when someone's been there for too long or the expectations are just off. You think about Andy Reid in Philadelphia. So, so that's what's going on here in Ann Arbor. But as far as the game goes, I thought it was pretty close. I think Michigan should have won. A little biased,
right.
As in doing this job, I have kind of forsaken all team loyalties for the most part, except for Michigan. You can't avoid it here.
Right.
And, when Stanford's better, I root for them too.
Well, I think the interesting thing is we had talked last week about how you said that Michigan was a team with a ceiling because of the quarterback play.
Right.
And I want to talk about Michigan State's ceiling because I don't think anything they did in that game necessarily shifts that equation for them. Am I wrong in thinking that, where we should still view Michigan State pretty similarly to what we did before?
I was impressed with their offense. Thorne had a pretty good game. The receivers were very good. Walker is great.
Yeah.
And so, what's the ceiling for that offense? They may be a really, really good elite offense. They clearly haven't shown that in some games, like against Indiana.
Right.
We'll see what they can do against a Purdue defense that my numbers really like. We have 8 games on Thorne right now. That's not a ton. That's only slightly less than what we have on McNamara. So, I don't know. I haven't seen as much of Thorne, so I can't really, kind of put the watching games perspective on it. But
right.
I don't think Michigan State's defense is that good.
Yeah.
I think we saw that. But they're 8-0. They're whatever, fourth in the college football playoff rankings. So they're clearly up there. Three teams in the Big Ten East are up there in the playoff rankings. Not all of them will end up in the college football playoff, obviously. So there's a lot to be determined.
And we'll be talking about that with Big Ten Ben Stevens on for today to talk about Week 10 across college football. We'll talk about those rankings. We'll talk Michigan State Purdue too. We'll get his thoughts on that game specifically and talk a lot about that. Ben, of course, is the host of the Morning After over on SportsGrid. We'll talk about college football Week 10 and the betting fallout of the college football playoff rankings later on today. Firstly, a quick reminder to make sure you are subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. We, of course, have a bi-weekly podcast this time of year to talk college football and the NFL. So you can get both those by subscribing to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're there, leave us a rating and review as well. Now, before we talk to Ben about Week 10, got to go back to last week and recap what we had with Drew Martin. And Drew had a very nice week on his bets.
Covering the past.
So last week, Drew Martin was on here to talk Week 9 in college football. He is on Twitter at Drew Martin Bets. And of course, he is also on SportsGrid, also over on Wager Talk. Drew had Auburn -1 when that game opened. He said that he would still bet it at 2.5. We discussed that game on Wednesday, and it closed at 3. So got some movement there from when he bet it and from when we discussed it, and they covered all those numbers. They got up in the first half. Matt Corral did get banged up in that game, but the defense for Auburn absolutely clamped down in the second half. You talked about how the public had caught on to Ole Miss's offense and how the time to buy them had passed. We saw a lot of that in that game against Ole Miss. Auburn won the game 31-20 to get the win for Drew. Auburn's kind of interesting, Ed. I think we kind of know what some things are with this team, but they're playing better football now than they played, at least to me, it feels like, for a while.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, well, they obviously have everything in front of them. So, yeah, they're at LSU this week, right? I think.
Yeah, so they are playing. We're talking about them with Ben, I believe. Yeah, they're playing Texas A&M this week. 4.5-point dogs.
Right. Yeah,
Texas A&M pretty feisty too. So it'll be a pretty fun game. We'll see how that one goes down. Drew was on North Carolina at plus 3.5 against Notre Dame, and the line closed there. Sam Howell made it a 7-point game with 7 minutes left. Notre Dame had a 13-play drive that really killed the clock. UNC still had a chance to cover because they got the ball back down 10 with 1:37 left, and they got to the Notre Dame 22 for one final play. Howell completed the pass. They got down to the 4-yard line, couldn't quite score. So a very close one there where Drew almost got the cover, couldn't quite get it across, but Notre Dame did cover. Either way, a close one for Drew there, but a loss for North Carolina. Finally, Drew said the dog was barking for Miami versus Pitt. And oh boy, were they. He liked Miami plus 9.5. It closed there. Miami won outright, so it didn't really matter. They won it 38-34 to get a super easy cover and the outright win. Nice week for Drew there, and I kind of hope that Drew, his Twitter name is Plus Money Martin. Kind of hoping he got the plus money on the Miami money line too. He didn't mention that, but I'm kind of hoping he did. It was a good game though for Miami, for sure. Your bet, Ed, was on Ohio State minus 17.5 against Penn State. It was 18.5 on Wednesday, and it did close there. Penn State kept that game close, and they lost by 9, but Ohio State really dominated the yardage department. They averaged 9 yards per rush or per pass versus 6.9 for Penn State. Ohio State was at 4.7 yards per rush versus 1.1 for Penn State. They just couldn't convert in the red zone. Ohio State kicked 4 field goals. That kept this game closer than it would have been otherwise. And it seems like, Ed, the field goals were the difference maker in terms of the spread in this game.
Yeah, I think this was a mistake. I'm leaning towards this being a mistake on my part in the sense that, you know, my model reacted pretty aggressively to what had happened the week before. Penn State's kind of shocking loss to Illinois, Ohio State beating, I think that was Indiana. And, you know, it made, before the previous week, Ohio State would have been about a 14-point favorite. And that shot up all the way to about 23. And in my eagerness to bet a favorite, a team that is probably going to be in the playoff, a team that could be dominant, although we certainly haven't seen it on the defensive side of the ball. We did see it on the defensive side of the ball in the previous 3 games, and actually 4, but Akron's essentially a bye week. So with Ohio State, I don't know. But when you kind of looked at my numbers, like that one game dropped Penn State down about 35th, which is just not where a James Franklin team is ever going to be.
Okay.
So I probably should have thought more into that. I think the spread 17.5, 18.5 was probably fair. You know, and things like, you know, shifted right back to basically where they were before the week, after the game. You know, Penn State actually had a better success rate than Ohio State. So yeah, I think it was a mistake. I think that so my aggressive model, the one that I use for this, is more accurate at predicting spreads in games. And that's why I go with it. But I think it can overreact. I think there's specific situations in which it can overreact, and this might have been one of them. Obviously, there's no certainties in life. This is just me talking about it. And it's also interesting to think about this in terms of Northwestern too, because, you know, this is a team that's traditionally somewhere between 25th and FBS average, 65th, right?
Right.
You know, are they really as bad as their success rate numbers look right now? Yeah, probably on offense, but maybe not so much on defense. So, you know, I mean, I did use the model to bet them against Michigan. Michigan did cover that. Let's see what.
The Rutgers game was the other one.
Yeah, the Rutgers game was another one where you're like, well, you know, is Northwestern really that bad? That program hasn't been below FBS average, right?
Right.
So, anyways, these are things I'm kind of thinking about as I kind of adjust to the new model, think about, when it can be wrong, because it certainly can be.
Well, I think that's one of the tough things too, because that model came out of COVID effectively, right? You were trying to react to changes. So that's a new model for you, like a year and a half old, correct?
Yeah. But I do think it has the right idea, because in college football, you have to react quickly. In NFL, you're probably,
but I think that's kind of the key thing here is when it's a new model, it's tougher to have like the red flags in your brain of, okay, I like this model overall. Here are the spots to look out for, the situations where it may be incorrect. You can't know that in a very small sample. And I think that's kind of the benefit here of like doing stuff live, doing stuff in time, is you can be like, oh, okay, now I have the red flag. I have that mantra. If a team has an outlierishly bad game, maybe I want to dig more into it. And I think that having that red flag and gaining that is something that we're going to do throughout the season, especially with a new model like the one you've developed here.
Yeah, I think that, you always want to learn, and a good way to learn faster is to lose money on it.
Right, exactly, which is why I have massive red flags whenever my NASCAR model says to bet Joey Logano. It's just, it's like, hey, maybe we should rethink this. So that's always helpful, and we can't get that without, putting money on the line. So I think that's been a learning experience for sure, too. So we'll see. Are you thinking of integrating the two models together, or is it more so you just want to have the red flag in your brain, like I said, with the new model and still lean more so on that one?
I don't integrate the models. I should probably do some back testing on it. One of the reasons I did bet Ohio State was that my model that only uses from data this year had Ohio State by almost 20. So there were other aspects to my analysis that pointed towards Ohio State. But obviously, you don't ever completely throw out your preseason prior and the market rankings, which are very predictive, were on the other side.
Right.
So,
well, good conversation to have, because a lot of people, I'm sure, with the spreading of legal betting probably are developing their own numbers, and it's good to know to be aware of these things, be aware of where your model may overestimate or underestimate teams. And I think that's a helpful conversation to have. So I'm sure we'll talk more about that as the season goes along as well. We're going to dive into college football week number 10 here in just 1 second. But first, the Breeders' Cup is set to begin this weekend, and FanDuel is celebrating by giving you a chance to get in on the action with some enhanced odds. Starting this Thursday, new players who sign up on FanDuel Racing will get 20-1 odds on any horse to win a Del Mar race on Friday or Saturday. That is any horse to win, even the favorites. The Breeders' Cup will be here before you know it. So bet horse racing right from your phone with the super easy to use FanDuel Racing app now. $5 max bet. Download the FanDuel Racing app. Visit racing.fanduel.com for more details. Eligibility restrictions apply.
Covering the present.
Let's bring Ben Stevens back into covering the spread to talk some college football week number 10 and talk about the college football playoff rankings. Ben, welcome back. How are you doing today?
Well, Jim, I've been better, mainly because Gary Barta and seeing that smile that he has each and every Tuesday night is back into my life, and having him denounce what all of Cincinnati has done and proven to do for the College Football Playoff Committee angers me once again. So outside of the CFP selection committee, I'm happy to see both of you guys. I do not wish them very well, but I was quite upset on Tuesday night when the CFP rankings came out. So my mood has been up and down the last couple of days.
But no lingering resentment, right? All good, right?
Oh, no lingering resentment. I mean, listen, I'm a Big Ten guy. You guys can see the Big Ten flags right there. Gary Barta, the athletic director of the University of Iowa. They love the Big Ten. I mean, why would Wisconsin be ranked unless you really, truly love the Big Ten? Why do you keep Michigan at number 7 ahead of Oklahoma? I don't even like OU, but the committee really loves the Big Ten Conference. So no lingering resentment for what he is doing to make my favorite sport in the world just seem meaningless throughout the regular season. No lingering resentment whatsoever.
Well, hey, first of all, I think Wisconsin's still a pretty good football team. I know they got some questions at quarterback. I thought that was one that, putting a 3-loss team in there, I think they're spot on there. But clearly Cincinnati's the big story, and it just doesn't look like they're going to go up with the remainder of their schedule and what, some obviously with 3 Big Ten teams in the top 7, not three teams are not going to end up in the top 7 in the final rankings. So, but it just doesn't look like Cincinnati has a path, right?
No, it really doesn't, because not only does Cincinnati need to worry about what's ahead of them, like Ohio State and Michigan State, who will seemingly knock each other out, like Oregon, who, if they are a one-loss Pac-12 champion, will probably get a bid, at least based on where things stand right now, according to the CFP selection committee. Not one-loss Alabama, but come on, it's Coach Nick Saban, so we don't care about losses on the road as a 16.5-point favorite. How could we ever care about that? So not only does Cincy need to worry about what's ahead of them, they also need to worry about what's behind them, because you have a perfect 9-0 Oklahoma team that if they win out and they are a Big 12 conference champion, like they are favored to do on the FanDuel Sportsbook at -200 as an odds-on favorite to win the Big 12 conference championship, you probably have Oklahoma leapfrogging you as well. So Cincinnati was put into a peculiar and disappointing position where they don't really control their own destiny. Was that always a thought? Would the Bearcats have an opportunity to really make their way and make their own path? Probably not the case, but with how the committee set it in the initial rankings, yes, it seems like Cincinnati is pretty SO out of luck, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, for sure. And it's kind of a bummer because I feel like things in one sense broke well for them in the fact that they got the win over Notre Dame, and Notre Dame isn't as good as their record suggests.
No.
So that's a break.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, the committee sent a clear message. Maybe that's better than putting him at third at this point and then like screwing him later, right? So
yeah,
I don't know.
My final point about Cincinnati, which angers me because no group of 5 team has ever even been ranked in the top 4. Of course, no group of 5 team has ever made the college football playoff, and now our 8th year of using this asinine system. But if we are not going to give Cincinnati the chance, what does that say to the Bearcats? That everything we have asked you to do means absolutely nothing, because for a lot of group of 5 teams, fair or unfair, is a 2-year process. So Cincinnati is unbeaten last year in a weird COVID year, keeps it tight with the number 1 team in the country right now in Georgia in a bowl game. And then the committee says that wasn't good enough. We need to see you schedule harder in the non-conference. So what do? They schedule a road test at a top 20 ranked Illinois team when the schedule was set. They schedule a road test on the road under the watchful eye of Touchdown Jesus in South Bend, Indiana. And that's still not good enough, despite it being a double-digit road win against the team that the committee then ranked 10th in the country. So what exactly can Cincinnati do? At this point, it almost seems defeating.
Yeah, I think that the rankings are frustrating for sure, but we can also draw some betting takeaways from them. And I think that's kind of the key thing, is deciding, okay, what are they telling us? And what does that mean for the futures market? So Ben, when you look at what you saw last night and then take a look at the futures market, anything standing out to you? Any maybe values or teams you're now staying away from as a result of what we saw last night?
What's very interesting to me, Jim, is that the betting market didn't move all that much, despite the fact that Cincinnati fell to number 6. Their odds got a little bit longer, but they were in plus money after this weekend anyway, and up to plus 180 right now in the FanDuel Sportsbook. What stood out first and foremost was that Oklahoma, who is currently ranked 8th in the country, according to the CFP selection committee, actually has better odds to make the college football playoff right now than both Alabama, who currently ranks number 2, and Ohio State, who currently ranks number 5 in the CFP's first rankings of the year. They're -174. The Buckeyes and the Tide are both -164. So when you have Oklahoma at -174, I should say, that's better than where Ohio State and Alabama stand. And then, of course, Georgia at -2,000. I think that's the only thing we all agree on, is that Georgia should be that much of a difference. Michigan State, from a perspective, is interesting. When you look at the Spartans really across the entire futures market, how the betting markets see the Spartans, it has been the same case all year long. Michigan State checked in the top 4 in the initial rankings, but they are plus 1040 to make the college football playoff on the FanDuel Sportsbook right now. They are plus 1,000, 10-1 to win the Big Ten Conference Championship, and they are still 80-1 to win the national championship as things currently stand. So I think even though the committee said, hey, congrats on being undefeated in a huge win against Michigan last week, there's really not that great of a shot, at least according to the betting market, on the Michigan State Spartans of making the Final Four when all is said and done.
And do you agree with that? Do you agree with that sentiment where, despite the win, Michigan State's path is still pretty tough?
I think so, because Michigan State next weekend on November 13th will have a game against Ohio State. And how Ohio State is playing right now, they need to get through the Buckeyes to even have a chance of winning the Big Ten East, to have a chance of winning the conference championship, to have a chance at the college football playoff. And although they are ranked ahead of Ohio State right now, if you have seen the Buckeyes play the last 4 weeks, it's not the same Ohio State team we saw lose to Oregon even at home in week number 2. So it's sad to say almost that Ohio State is exactly where we expected them to be based on what we thought might be a different scenario in the Big Ten Conference, specifically the Big Ten East Division entering the year, at least in the early going of the year. But I think it makes sense because Michigan State still has so much to do to get past Ohio State and then end the year even trying to knock off Penn State as well.
I mean, what do you think Michigan State's ceiling is?
Well, I think right now it's probably a New Year's Six Bowl. It's probably a Rose Bowl appearance if Ohio State makes a college football playoff, because that could be their only regular season loss, because I am a lot higher on Michigan State than the market might be. If you guys have seen my Twitter, dating back to a random Tuesday in the middle of May, I let out a Big Ten take. I said that Michigan State was going to win 7 games in this 2021 college football season. It turns out I already hit the over there. Even I undersold a team, Jim, that had a team win total of 4.5 entering the year. Now they are a perfect 8-0. They are one of 3 teams in all of FBS college football that has just a single loss against the spread. That's how good Michigan State has been. That's how profitable Michigan State has been. So I think right now it's a New Year's Six Bowl, which would be quite an accomplishment for Mel Tucker in his second year. But the reason I have been as high on MSU throughout the entirety of the season is because of the complete talent overhaul on that roster we saw Mel Tucker undertake with the Spartans entering year number 2, and it's a very different team. And we are seeing that right now with Kenneth Walker III, who is a Heisman finalist in my mind, is tied for the 3rd shortest odds to win the Heisman Trophy. So I think their ceiling as it currently stands and what is still out there for the Spartans is probably a New Year's Six Bowl. If they pulled off the incredible and upset Ohio State, there's a great path to the college football playoff.
Tough to see that happening, though, because right now Ohio State minus 270 to win the Big Ten over at FanDuel Sportsbook. You mentioned that Michigan State is 10-1. Nobody else outside of Ohio State shorter than 10-1. Any lingering value for you in Ohio State with how they played, or is there value elsewhere, or just a market to stay away for you right now?
I mean, it's probably a stay away at the moment. To see Ohio State have the best odds of any team in any conference in all of college football on FanDuel right now to win their conference championship is something we could have said probably back in early August. But after the start Ohio State got on, it wasn't something we felt at the time. Now Ohio State minus 270 feels about right for where the Buckeyes are. So the thought process has always been, Jim, and it's funny because with how interesting this college football season has been, with how many upsets we have seen, and from what we saw on both of these teams in the early going, to think that we are headed toward a Ohio State and Wisconsin Big Ten title game is not the craziest thought in the world. So my thought entering the year in terms of a value play in the futures market in the Big Ten was you need to pick the winner of the Big Ten West, who will ultimately face off against Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game, because you hope that the value you have right now is better than what the money line number would be for that Big Ten championship game, where Ohio State's probably at least a 2-touchdown favorite. So right now that you see Wisconsin at 10-1, and Wisconsin still has some work to do to get past Minnesota, who is 18-1 to win the Big Ten Conference Championship. That would be my focus. Look at the teams in the Big Ten West, and right now it seems like Wisconsin and Minnesota are destined to decide who wins the Big Ten West Division in the battle for Paul Bunyan's axe the final week of the regular season. I think it will be Wisconsin based on where the Badgers are trending, based on how good that defense is, ahead of Georgia in total defense in the country, ahead of Georgia, surprisingly so, in terms of rushing defense. Georgia's still the best defense in the country. I will not mince words there, but that's how good Wisconsin is, that they rank ahead of them in those statistical categories. So I think it will probably be Wisconsin. So then at 10-1, you hope that's a better price than the money line value you might be able to hedge out on in the Big Ten championship game, but that's where I would look for value.
Excellent. All right, well, let's stay in the Big Ten. Michigan State goes to Purdue. Michigan State is a road 2.5-point favorite at FanDuel Sportsbook. Everywhere else I looked about a half an hour ago was at Michigan State at 3. So, Michigan State clearly beat Michigan last week. What are you thinking about this game?
I think the reason it's at 2.5 is, again, the public has never really had confidence and the betting market has never really had that full faith in Mel Tucker and the Spartans. So that's why it's at 2.5 only for the number 3 team in the country, according to the CFP poll, and a team that is a perfect unbeaten 8-0, and also the potential of a trap game letdown spot following in that huge 16-point comeback victory at home against their bitter rival in Michigan. When I look at it from a perspective of actually breaking this game down, though, from a football perspective of what we will see on the field, it also isn't the greatest matchup for Michigan State, because Purdue, who loves to be that plucky thorn in every Big Ten team's side, is a great throwing team. That is Jeff Brom's offensive philosophy. Throw the football at all costs. And Purdue is the third best passing offense in the Big Ten, averaging over 307 passing yards per game. Michigan State, by far the worst passing defense in the Big Ten Conference, allowing more than 300 yards per game. And we saw even Michigan, who loves to run the football, runs the football at the 7th highest clip in all of college football, look efficient in the passing game with Cade McNamara against the Spartan secondary this past Saturday, even in a defeat. So I know that that is what Purdue is going to try to do. And defensively, the Boilers are pretty good up front, but they do allow a lot of chunk yardage on the ground, over 135 yards given up on the ground per game on average. And of course, Kenneth Walker III is on the other side for Michigan State. So that is where Michigan State is going to go to try to win this football game. I still believe in Michigan State. The number is strange. It smells like a fish. I'm not entirely sure why it's so short outside of the overall narrative of it, but I still have belief in Michigan State. If you would have twisted my arm, and yes, this is revisionist history, and I could say whatever I want right now, I probably would have taken the points with MSU last weekend in East Lansing, but it was very hard to find an edge in that game. I look at this game a little bit differently, where I still believe in Michigan State, although we know what a house of horrors West Lafayette can be for teams in early November when they have their sights set on something more than the Purdue Boilermakers. So I still would lay the points with Michigan State on the road. I think it will be very close to that 2.5, though. If Michigan State ends up winning by a field goal, cool, you got the better number on the FanDuel Sportsbook, and that hook could certainly giveth on Saturday.
I think it's an interesting situation here because it sounds like the conviction level is kind of low. Are you convinced enough with Michigan State to actually like bet this one, or is this more of a lean for you?
This would be more of a lean. Jim, we talk all the time on the morning after about your power ratings and what it takes for you to say, all right, now this makes sense. It gives me the edge that I need here. And then the numbers also back up how I feel about this game. This would be more the feel about this game. I'm not sure my power rating numbers, of which I do not have them. I'm not as smart as both of you, very intelligent men. But if my numbers were going to be around it, I would probably make it a 2.5 point game. So the edge probably isn't there. It's more a feel of having had that belief in Michigan State since the summer. And at this point, might as well ride out the take.
Okay, so just a lean towards Michigan State here in this one versus Purdue. Let's move now to Auburn versus Texas A&M. Texas A&M 4.5 point favorites. Total is 49.5. And Auburn trending up, maybe potentially. Bo Nix played a bit better the past 2 weeks. I'm hesitant to be too effusive there. Auburn's gotten a couple big wins. We've also got a large sample on him not being this. So are you buying the recent uptick for Auburn's offense, or are you still skeptical?
Well, I'm a little bit still skeptical because I need to see Bo Nix continue to do it. And that's something about Bo Nix. And that's maybe not fair from an overall assessment point. But we know the numbers, especially in big road games, in Bo Nix's tenure playing quarterback for the Auburn Tigers. But this year, Auburn on the road, especially against the number, has been pretty good. 2-1 ATS, covering by more than a touchdown on average. And since Bo Nix was benched in that Georgia State game, he has looked really good. He is playing with a confidence level we have yet to see. His head coach, Brian Harsin, said at the time, I hope it lights a fire under our young quarterback. And it certainly seems to have done that. That being said, he is now facing a defense in Texas A&M who ranks in the top 5 in scoring defense in the country, only giving up about just over 16 points per game to their opponent. Can he continue to put up these numbers we have seen in recent weeks against probably the best defense he will see this year, maybe outside of Alabama and the Georgia team they saw a couple of weeks ago, where they only put up 10 points? So with that being said, and that game, by the way, also on the road against Georgia. So with that all being said, I'm not so sure I'm buying in on Auburn, but where I think the value might be here is on that over-under total, because as I mentioned, A&M, one of the best defenses in the country. If they can contain Auburn to around 2 scores, I don't know that Jimbo Fisher and the Aggies are going to need to do much more than that. And Zach Calzada, the quarterback who's had to step in for those Texas A&M Aggies, has looked a lot better himself, but still not the most prolific offense there in College Station. So I could very much see this game being slightly low scoring, something like a 2014 A&M, a 21-17 A&M, a more bitter, grinded out game than potentially. So if my lean overall, the area I would look probably at the under of that total.
And that is at 49.5 right now over at FanDuel Sportsbook for that A&M versus Auburn game. Let's move now to Oregon at Washington. A lot of weird stuff going on in the media with this one this week. It's been fun as a consumer of the content. Oregon is a 6.5-point favorite. Total is 51.5. Oregon, despite being top 4 in the playoff rankings, hasn't really played anybody. They've not played anyone outside of Ohio State, ranked top 40 by SP Plus, by Bill Connolly's number at ESPN. So they've convinced the playoff committee. But Ben, are you convinced with Oregon right now?
Okay. Here we go. I understand the head-to-head matchup indicator that the committee used to rank Oregon over Ohio State. For this initial ranking, I can make my peace with that. Ohio State is not the same team they were week number 2. Oregon won that game on the road as a 13.5-point underdog without Kayvon Thibodeau and some of their other best defenders. All good by me. Fine for these initial rankings. No, Jim, I am not convinced by the Oregon Ducks because they are just 2-6 against the spread. They have only won those 2 games when booked as an underdog. That game against Ohio State in the Rose Bowl is virtually a pick'em against UCLA a couple of Saturdays ago. As a favorite, of which they are this week on the road in Seattle, they are 0-6 against the number, not covering by more than a touchdown on average. So no, I am not convinced that Oregon is one of the top 4 teams in the country. And for all of the arguments about Cincinnati, tying this back into Gary Barta's loose rhetoric that Cincinnati didn't look all that great against Navy and Tulane, wait till he hears that Oregon lost to a Stanford team that has 3 wins. We'll wait for that for the next edition of our CFP rankings show. All that being said, no, I'm not convinced in the Ducks. I'm not necessarily convinced in the Ducks laying this number against Washington, but Washington has truly, truly been a struggle so far this year. I mean, when you look at what they did in the first couple of weeks, they've rallied back from that, and they actually still have the 3rd shortest odds to win the Pac-12. It's a far drop-off. It's Oregon at even money, then it's Utah at plus 110, then it's Washington at 12-1 because there might be a path if they knock off Oregon in this game that would decide the winner of the Pac-12 North. But I don't believe in this Washington team either, who is also a very bad margin against the spread. In their last 2 wins in Pac-12 play, beating Stanford and Arizona by a single score, an average of a 6-point margin of victory over those 2 teams. In Arizona, as you guys well know, one of 2 teams in college football that doesn't have a win straight up this year. So I don't really believe in either of these 2 teams. It's not out yet where I would look to play this. Is I like Oregon's defense. I hate Washington's offense. If I don't want to attack the game total overall or the spread inside of the favorite, I love team totals in college football. I think there are edges to be had. I would probably lean a Huskies team total under for this game in the Pac-12.
Excellent. And for Oregon, I don't really believe in this Oregon team too. It looks like if they're going to fall out of the playoff contention, it's probably at Utah in a couple weeks.
I would think so. That could be a game that might decide Oregon's college football playoff state, but it also could be just a preview of what we are going to see in 2 more weekends after that in the Pac-12 title game, because Utah has been really, really good at home. And thankfully for Utah, that matchup will be in Salt Lake against Oregon. So I don't think Utah then all of a sudden shoots up the board to be a team you would have to put in contention for a college football playoff spot. It could derail what the Ducks want to do, but I think it's still probably, if Oregon beats Washington this week, a preview of what we might see just a couple of weeks later in the Pac-12 title game.
So we'll see how that one goes down. Yeah, Oregon 6.5-point favorite right now, total 51.5. And once that team total for Washington is posted, check it out and see if you got value on the under with that one. Ben, anywhere else seeing value for this week based on the odds of FanDuel Sportsbook?
I think something that is very interesting, Jim, is a game in the ACC where I'm not entirely sure why the unranked home team is favored this week against the number 9 team in the country in Wake Forest, because Wake Forest now has to prove what its medal is actually worth. A perfect 8-0 straight up, 5-0 in ACC play, but just 4-4 against the spread. The next 3 weeks for the Demon Deacs will tell us all we need to know on if Wake Forest is a legitimate contender to be an unbeaten ACC champ and have a legitimate path to the college football playoff, because they have North Carolina this week. And what actually an interesting note here is a non-conference game. This game has been on the books for almost a decade and was before Wake Forest joined the ACC. So that is an interesting note for how this game is conceptualized, just so everybody knows. It does not exactly affect Wake Forest's chance of winning an ACC championship. I know,
wow.
Surprised myself, but that is how this game is scheduled. as of right now, very weird things. But then Wake Forest has North Carolina this week on the road. They have NC State and then Clemson in the next 2 weekends following this test against the Tar Heels. We'll know very quickly if Wake Forest is a legitimate contender for that ACC title. I look at this game. The total has been already steamed up to 76.5. Wake Forest has played some games that would leave nobody wanting more offense than what you have seen, because there was a game where Wake Forest scored 70 points against a Service Academy and Army who also scored 56 points, and the over-under total for that game was 51.5. So this being near 76.5 right now against North Carolina, who has played 5 of their 8 games to the over, would beg you to take an over, right? Well, I look at this like if Wake Forest is going to win this game, if they are going to just win outright as a dog, you probably will see an under come into play. So if you want to take Wake Forest this weekend, I would also lean the under, or you could just take the money line price for a team that is booked as an underdog, where they've only been booked as an underdog once before this year, and they beat Virginia straight up 37-17 when they were a 3.5-point dog against the Hoos a couple of weeks ago.
Do you have a preference in those markets? Are you looking at the money line mostly? Do you want the points? Do you want the under? Lean for you between those three, or are you interested in all of them?
In this case right here, because the spread is past what we would consider a key number of 3 in the NFL, I would probably actually lean money line, because in college football, unlike the NFL, this is Wake Forest can't lose again if they want to win the ACC, or they want to prove to the College Football Playoff Committee that they need to be a part of the conversation. They can ill afford any losses. So it's not about covering 2.5 points and boy, we lost by a field goal, or boy, we lost by an extra point, whatever it might be. They're going to try to win this football game. And when I think Wake Forest is the better team overall, I would probably lean money line, because in my experience, the lines in college football are not as sharp as the NFL. It is much harder to beat a side in the NFL than it is in college football. And when it's that close for a game that we can expect to be close, I would probably lean money line if I was backing the Wake Forest side.
All right. So Ben is on Wake Forest plus 114 in the money line versus UNC for this weekend. That is Ben Stevens. Check him out on Twitter at Ben Scott Stevens, and check out the morning after on SportsGrid every weekday over on SportsGrid. Ben, we appreciate the time. Enjoy the football this weekend. Enjoy the 6 days you get off until you get mad at the football playoff rankings once again. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you very much, Jim. I'm still stewing thinking about next Tuesday night, but thank you for having me, guys.
Maybe not 6 days until the anger begins. We'll just let it hang out until that time comes.
Well,
again,
now you
right?
know what to expect, though, right?
Right.
So you got like 6 days to meditate on it. And
to be honest, Ed, I thought I knew what I expected this time too, and I still got disappointed. I do the same thing every week.
You. Let the anger flow through you, Ben. Let it happen. Don't restrict this at all.
It certainly does. It certainly does.
Well, thank you very much. We'll talk to you soon.
Covering the future.
Big thank you once again to Ben Stevens for swinging by and breaking down college football week number 10 and talking about the college football playoff. You can find Ben on Twitter at Ben Scott Stevens. Check him out on the morning after on SportsGrid every weekday. Let's move now into covering the future for this week. And Ed, we're recording on Wednesday, which means if you want to talk Thursday night football, we got to talk about it for today. So you're talking Jets versus Colts, and I'm fascinated to hear what you've got cooked up for this one.
Yeah, so if you saw the Colts against Tennessee, they were tied late in the game. Carson Wentz drops back in his own end zone, and he was under pressure, and he decided to chuck the ball with his left hand to avoid the safety, and he threw it right to a Titans player for a pick six. They ended up going down and tying the game after that. So, kudos to the offense. There was kind of a lucky pass, and then there was a pass there was a brain dead pass interference on the Titans safety, but they ended up tying up. And then Wentz throws another awful interception in triple coverage in overtime, and Tennessee won that game. So clearly 2 bad decisions don't define a quarterback, but Wentz's offense just looks kind of terrible. They're last when I look at success rate adjusted for opponents, and Indianapolis pass defense is not that much better. They rank 31st. When you look at coverage grades on PFF, it looks like Xavier Rhodes and Kenny Moore, 2 of their cornerbacks, have dropped off significantly from last year. So I really see this as a chance to fade the Colts with such a big number here. Obviously, we got to talk about the other side too, because the Jets don't have Zach Wilson. He got hurt a couple weeks ago, but before that New England game, the pass offense was 31st. They weren't particularly good. So Mike Wright has replaced Wilson. He led the Jets to that big win over Cincinnati. And they did have like a crazy 66% passing success rate. It's significantly higher than the NFL average of about 45%. I mean, it's hard to make too much of, obviously, a small sample size. I obviously don't think they're going to keep that insane rate up. But Zach Wilson wasn't really even playing at an NFL average level either. And we don't know what the drop-off, or if there is going to be a drop-off to Mike White. It's not like we're trying to replace Aaron Rodgers, right? So, and the other side of the ball, Jets pass defense. So they came into a lot of questions. They had a lot of questions earlier this season, throwing a lot of young guys in the secondary. But they're actually 15th when I look at my adjusted success rate. They're getting pretty good contributions from 2 young cornerbacks and Bryce Hall, second-year player, and Michael Carter, a 5th-round rookie, according to PFF grades. So my model likes Indianapolis by about 5. The data from the current season actually likes the Jets by a point, which tells you how much my model hates the Colts in terms of, mostly because of both sides of the ball. So I'm finding value. I bet this Jets plus 10.5. All the sharp books actually had a slight lean towards the Jets as well. So yeah, I like this game.
Yeah, Mike White's interesting because he's going to grade out well in success rate models because he doesn't throw downfield, which, I mean, is what it is. But like the Colts play a defense typically, they may change this for Thursday, but it's conducive to the same type of stuff the Jets used to beat the Bengals, where they want to stop the deep pass, and the Jets aren't going to throw deep with Mike White. His average at the target was like 4.4, I think, last week. So like, it's possible that formula wouldn't work against most teams, but it might work against this team. So I'm looking at my numbers right now. And if I combine my priors with 2021 data and adjust for Mike White versus Zach Wilson, I had the Jets projected to rank 31st in passing efficiency, but I still see value on this game. My numbers of the Jets plus 7.6 as the number, and it's a 10.5. So it shows value there as well. And like that's with the Jets, assuming that the passing offense regressive massively from where it was last week, which probably is honestly an indication that it agrees with you on Indianapolis. It got them 18th in passing offense right now. Overall defense, if I do for that, they are, I guess they're still 8th there.
8th?
But
what are you using for that?
So it's numberFire's metrics. It's a combination of priors and what we've seen so far this year. They're 19th against the pass. Why are they 8th overall? Anyway, I'll dig into that more later. But even with the defense being graded positively there, it still shows value in the Jets. Not sure. Oh, it's because, yeah, I guess their rush defense has been good, and I think that's factoring into it because the Jets tend to be pretty rush heavy. But I think that if I had to guess, that's probably the reason why. But
yeah,
10.5 is just
I
a big
Colts
number.
Rush defense pretty good.
Yeah, they're first based on the combo of priors and 2021 data for me as well. But like it's still a big number for a guy who is very prone to mistakes and can erase and can put himself in a hole in terms of the spread very quickly. So I think that I'd agree with you on Jets plus 10.5.
Great.
So we'll see how that one goes. Again, that's Thursday night. We'll talk more NFL tomorrow. And I've got NFL right now as well because I've been trying to avoid college football stuff. And if I look at my numbers, I did see value in the Jets, do see some value in other stuff. But like for the most part, I can talk myself out of more bets than I can talk myself into this week in terms of the sides. So as such, I'm probably going to lean more in the team total market versus the spread market this week. So that's going to force me to take the Vikings over 21.5 against the Ravens for their team total. That's minus 110 at FanDuel Sportsbook. I have a really hard time quitting this Vikings offense right now, even with their inconsistencies, with their weird bat down games. They're ranked 5th in schedule adjusted passing offense based on numberFire's metrics. They're facing Baltimore, and Baltimore's had good flashes this year, specifically in that Chargers game, but they're not the juggernaut defensively that they once were. They're 21st against the pass. They're 18th overall defensively. I think the Vikings should be able to move the football here. Because the passing offense has been so good, my numbers are showing value on the spread right now because it does weight heavily towards passing offense. That's at 6 points right now, the spread is. So you are getting across 4 and 3 as far as key numbers go, but I just still worry about, betting the spread when the Vikings defense just lost Neil Hunter. They don't have Patrick Peterson. They're down some key players right now. So I struggle to get to the spread here. I think that's why I want to gravitate more towards the team total than the spread, given that there is some risk tied to that Vikings defense. It gives me more avenues to hit, more leeway if things get crazy to go with the team total here versus the spread. And I just see value in betting on the Vikings right now. My favorite avenue here is attacking it via their team total over 21.5. That's -110. That's my first bet this week. And Ed, I had another not like a red flag moment, but I do think my numbers tend to be a little high in the Vikings. So I want to get a check with you. What do your numbers say about Minnesota's offense specifically? And is it wrong for me to be high on them right now?
I mean, I think my numbers like Minnesota's offense when I look at adjusted success rate. They dropped significantly. They're 14th.
Okay.
They were in the top 10. So what? Yeah. So I still think they, when you have those pieces at wide receiver, there is upside there. So, I mean, my model actually has Minnesota with 24 points. So it would agree with what you are saying.
Okay. And I think that the reason that the adjusted success rate numbers probably dropped is because they faced Dallas last week, and Dallas had been letting up a really high success rate, but they had been getting by with turnovers. And suddenly on Sunday night that flipped. They suddenly they changed. I don't know if they changed something or what, but suddenly the success rate against them was crazy low.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just the randomness of the NFL. But right. I thought it was it. What did you think of Cooper Rush?
I think he was fine. I think that he made good decisions, which is kind of all you can ask of a backup. Physically limited, but he made good decisions. And if I were looking for a backup, I feel like that's kind of what I'd covet. And
that's fine when you have those receivers, right?
Right.
So I've been thinking a lot about kind of how receivers and quarterbacks mesh, and what can a quarterback like Josh Allen do before he had Stephon Diggs, right? Not as much, clearly. And there's a synergy there. And
I mean, Bengals with Burrow and Chase too. That offense might be kind of fluky given that they're feasting on big plays, but they're generating big plays, and that's worth something at least too.
Yeah, Jamar Chase, I think when I last looked, was getting 3 yards per route run, which usually the top receivers are near 2. Mm-hmm. So there's clear regression inevitable there, and I didn't check it after the last game, but
it went down because they faced the Jets, and that was that game where Hall. You mentioned Bryce Hall playing well. He had dropped in the draft because of medical stuff, but when he's healthy, he's playing well. So I think that it makes sense. That we'd see some regression in that game, and it hit in a big way too.
Yeah, where did he go to college?
Virginia.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that it might not have all been medicals, but I think he had some shoulder thing that really threw stuff off. And I know that when they took him, it was a bet on upside, I think was kind of the thought process. Yeah. And it's working, but will that stick? Right. Exactly.
That stuff is volatile. So
it is. See. The NFL is volatile.
If you're the Jets and you have a league average pass defense,
bet on upside every time.
Doing a little dance, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's pretty good.
With that personnel, you'll take it. There have been a lot of issues this year, but they've got a good defensive line. Sounds like the coaching staff defensively is doing some good stuff. So encouraging stuff, even though overall, there's a long way to go for sure. That is all that we have here for today on the college football edition of Covering the Spread. Big thank you once again to Ben Stevens of SportsGrid for swinging by and chatting about week number 10. You can find him on Twitter at Ben Scott Stevens. Tomorrow, we're talking NFL week number 9 with Erin Dolan of FanDuel, getting her thoughts on week number 9 and her favorite bets of the week. Ed, what is going on for you this week over at the Power Rank?
I had Edward Egros on Football Analytics Show. Always a good conversation. Asked him about the a-hole that makes him write the 7 nuggets every Saturday. That would be me. So yeah, he's got so many projects going on. We talked a lot about being on TV in LA, talked about writing up those 7 nuggets and how it's been a great opportunity for both of us to kind of explore other things. And so that is on Football Analytics Show. It might not be up by the time this goes up, but it'll be up on Wednesday. And then my free email newsletter looking at sports betting, games that I bet, 7 Nugget Saturday. You can get that at thepowerrank.com.
All righty. And find Ed on Twitter at The Power Rank. I'm at Jim Sannes, JimSannes. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you once again to everyone for tuning in for today. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow to break down NFL week number 9. This has been covering the spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.
What's up, guys? This is Jordan Spieth. If you're watching this video, please like and subscribe to the FanDuel YouTube channel.